Hi, my name is Kimberly Grace, and today I'm going to read to you an excerpt from my book, A Pause in Life Can Lead to Love. This is a book that I self-published and is available for purchase online on Amazon and other online retailers. Today I'm going to read to you chapters 1 and 2. Let's begin. Chapter 1. 2 years later. Jude woke up gasping for air and sweating profusely. She reached over to her nightstand to find the clock. It was only 2 a.m. She lay back on her pillow, and as soon as she realized it was not real and just a nightmare, she felt her heart rate start to settle slightly. Jude tossed to her side and wondered what she could do to stop having the same horrific dream over and over again. She knew the nightmares were directly correlated to her guilt over her parents' untimely and tragic deaths. Jude could never forgive herself for not trying to do more to save them. In her dreams, she could see them desperately clinging to their boat as it sank. Jude tried with all her might to get to the water and rescue them, but it was no use. She had shackles and chains on her wrists and ankles, and a man was holding the other ends of the chains in order to prevent her from moving. Every time Jude had this dream, she could never make out the mystery man's face. But the shrill, maniacal laughter emanating from his voice echoed in Jude's mind, even when she was awake. Jude hated this man for his terrorizing cruelty, even though he was not real. Yet every time she had this dream, she felt like she was getting closer to seeing his face and figuring out his identity. This time, she sensed in her nightmare that the evil man was the same man who had stopped her from entering the water the day that her parents died. Jude closed her eyes, trying to see if she could recreate the face of the man in her mind. I don't even know who the man was that stopped me that day. I was too much of a crying mess and in distress to notice anything about him. The only thing I do recall is that he was very comforting, and it felt nice being held by him. Definitely the complete opposite portrayal of the evil man in my dream. Rather, I felt safe in his arms, like nothing could ever hurt me, if I had just stayed in them. But the truth is that even though I know he meant well by stopping me from going in, I also resent him for it. My parents would be alive today if it weren't for this stranger intercepting me. Jude knew she was too awake now to try and go back to sleep, so instead she tiptoed quietly downstairs. She made her way to the screened-in porch and carefully set up her easel and canvas. Painting had always been her way of coping with her emotions, especially when they felt too overwhelming to express any other way. Tonight she decided to paint a serene night sky with millions of beautiful shining stars that shone like angels dancing around a crescent moon. Yet underneath she used thicker swirling brushstrokes of lots of dark colors to create a rough sea. The waves towered high and cascaded violently into one another across the bottom of the painting. Jude even started tossing paint globs at the canvas. She needed to release the pain and grief that was shattering her heart at the moment. When she was finished, she sat on the floor with silent tears dripping down her face and stared expressionless at the picture she had just made. Quiet, calm, and serene on top, but a raging storm tearing everything apart underneath. Jude made the connection that it was a reflection of herself. No matter how happy she seemed on the outside to everyone, she knew the monster was lurking below the surface, ready to pull her down again. Her sister had suggested therapy because it was helping her, but Jude couldn't bring herself to talk about it with anyone. She had tried to open up to a therapist one time, but when she had opened her mouth to speak, no words would come out. Scott had been her last remaining lifeline of hope for a brighter future. Jude lost all of her dreams and ambitions when he broke her heart. Now she was barely hanging on by a thread and felt like she could shatter into a million pieces at any moment. At this point, Jude snapped out of her head and noticed the first hint of light was beginning to form on the horizon. Oh no, it's almost sunrise. I'm going to be late for my interview. Jude quickly packed away her art supplies and darted from the porch only to nearly collide with her sister. Paula looked stunned to see her sister up so early and covered in paint. Before she could even open her mouth to inquire about it, Jude interjected. I'm so sorry, Paula, but I can't stay and chat. I'm running behind schedule and my interview is in less than an hour. We'll talk later, okay? And Jude was out of sight before Paula could even respond. Paula stepped out onto the porch and looked at Jude's painting. She was a bit stunned by its contrasting beauty and turmoil. It was clearly a very emotional piece that her sister had created, and a concerned look crossed Paula's face. I thought Jude was finally sleeping better, but clearly last night was a terrible night for her. My sister has been keeping too much inside, and now I fear it is bubbling up to the surface. She needs to talk to someone before she explodes or lets it consume her. Jude won't talk to me, but there has to be someone she can confide in. I need to talk to my therapist and seek guidance on this. I need to save my sister before it is too late. And with that, Paula went in search of her therapist's phone number and to start brewing the morning coffee. Lots of coffee would definitely be needed today, thought Paula. The sun was barely making its debut, and there was already a palpable tension for the day ahead. Chapter 2. Dylan squinted from the glaring sun as he held his hand up ineffectively over his eyes to shield them as much as possible. He normally never forgets his sunglasses, but he had arrived home late today, and he knew his golden retriever Lennon would be disappointed they didn't take their usual sunset walk on the beach. His dog may be 9 years old, but he still acts like a puppy when his paws hit the sand. To Lennon, the beach is like a big playground. Dylan laughed as his dog barked and chased a group of seagulls. That dog always optimistically thought the birds would one day listen to him and play with him. Even though Dylan's job as the head IT technician for Safeguard Insurance in New York often forced him to work long into the night, he always made it his number one priority to make sure his best friend got the fresh air and exercise that he looked forward to every day. So after an agonizing hour-and-a-half commute home from the city, Dylan turned off his cell phone in order to silence the ever-climbing counter on his email app, changed quickly out of his work clothes, and laced up his sneakers to take his dog to the beach. Lennon always sat patiently in front of him, holding his leash in his mouth. He'd sit there happily swishing his tail back and forth on the floor like it was a cleaning mop. Although Dylan loved the fast-paced nature of working in the city, he always felt relieved and more relaxed every night returning home to Point Pleasant. He had grown up in the beach town, and living by the ocean was in his blood. It also helped that he could work remotely 3 days a week. You can't beat working with an ocean view and a goofy dog to keep you entertained throughout the day, Dylan mused. Lennon loved the days that Dylan stayed home, and to show his excitement and appreciation, he would often bring his master various presents. They would range from his dog toys to random objects like a flip-flop or a TV remote, and he would always excitedly drop them at Dylan's feet. Dylan made sure to make a big fuss over his gifts every time. He knew it made his old dog so happy to give him something he deemed special and valuable. Yet Dylan's favorite treasures that Lennon would bring him were the strange items he would find on the beach. They ranged from regular run-of-the-mill beach items to more intriguing mysteries such as a deflated wacky inflatable, half a melting ice sculpture of a gingerbread man, a tattered wedding dress, and even a garden gnome. Despite how odd and random the items were, the dog knew his owner would be grateful and celebrate his findings. Lennon usually brought back different items every time, but lately he had consistently been bringing him art supplies. Dylan was confused as to why Lennon was so fixated on these items, but figured he would soon go back to finding other things. It was starting to get dark as the final soft orange and red glow of the sun dipped below the horizon. Dylan whistled for Lennon, and he came racing toward him with something in his mouth. "What do you have for me today, boy?" Dylan reached down and took hold of the item in Lennon's mouth. It was a paintbrush with dried green and blue paint on it. He scratched his dog's ears and patted his head. "Good boy, you're starting to gather quite a collection here, Lennon. Are you trying to tell me something? You want me to take up painting, perhaps?" Dylan chuckled and bent down to reattach the leash for the walk back home. "All right, Lennon, let's go. Should we order a pizza for dinner? Bark once for yes and bark twice if you want pepperoni on it." Lennon happily barked twice and wagged his tail. He was a very smart dog and could understand several words, which of course included his favorites, walk and pizza. Once they reached the house, Dylan looked more closely at the paintbrush in the light. The blue and green hues blended well on the brush to make a pretty ocean color. He wondered if an artist had been painting a picture of the ocean. Dylan really hoped that Lennon wasn't stealing these items, and that instead he had just randomly come upon some lost items like the other random discarded objects he usually found. Well, surely if he was sneaking someone's things away, they would have noticed by now and stopped him. He tossed the brush into a box labeled Lennon's Beach Treasures. Then, with a loud gurgling reminder of his hungry stomach, he headed back inside to order his dinner and did not give the box another thought.